thank you all for joining us. Thank you, sir.
Of course.
Congratulations on an amazing week.
Thank you.
Been following the progress on Instagram. You seem to be quite the avid user of social media.
I've gotten completely addicted.
Mm-hmm. What is it about Instagram, that immediacy that you enjoy so much?
Well, it's communication is king. And I have the ability to continuously be in touch with a consumer base, a fan base, an aspirational group of people. And, you know, it's complete branding. I'm able to be as honest and personal as possible while building an identity of a brand without actually, at this stage, taking out an advertorial in print. It's something very natural. It also protects my privacy.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm able to give enough information out there in the world that it doesn't enable the hunger for the search, because I'm actually supplying the demand for interest.
So talk a little bit about that interest and that feedback loop that this medium creates, that you're seeing immediate feedback from fans, from the press, as you post images real time. What does that do for you in your creative process?
Well, in my creative process, what it gives me the ability to do is to react, to surprise, to entice, to tease. It all goes in part of it. I mean, I'm able to actually do something very visceral and untech-like, which is to actually take fabric on a mannequin, drape it, build it, and have reaction. And it's a very wide audience, international audience of people that are reacting to that, and you get a diversity of reactions to it.
And do you actually make adjustments to creative decisions based on, say, positive, negative reaction?
Sometimes, yeah, it's quick reaction. I'm trying to see what they're showing.
What are we looking at? Oh, we have Lena Dunham
Ladies.
here.
Ladies on the carpet.
On the carpet, this Golden Globes.
Miss Golden Globes. You know, it's also a way, obviously, to promote your performers and your collaborators that you work with. So whether I'm working with actors, it's able to walk people through that process. And I think the most interesting takeaway that I've had, especially on Instagram, is the fascination with tactile craft. It wasn't something that I wasn't prepared that that's what would be the leading driver of my Instagram, but the process of building a couture work and building construction or pattern making and having people react to the process of the fitting photos is fascinating, because it's something that can't be done on a computer. There's just no way to have emotional reaction to fabric in that way on a computer and mold it with your hands, just like the difference between oil painting and being on, you know, on a Photoshop. So that's very thrilling to me and satisfying. And then there's lots of photos of food. Oh yeah, there are some of the draping photos. Yeah, so the one on the left was something that ended up in the show that was on Crystal Wren, and some of the mood images and boards behind it. And then on the far left side is something that I nixed. It was just too zhuzhy.
Little too much?
I don't know. It didn't work for me. But the fans loved it. You know, I think that things that are straightforward, that are bold, that do have that strong visceral reaction are successful creations. I don't believe, you know, I think that art should be challenging, but I think that also the reason I'm a designer is because it's art and commerce, and you need that visceral reaction from the consumer, from the fan, that just becomes emotional.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to dive into those details a little bit. You talk about that, the hand stitching and the more ephemeral moments. That also gets into a bigger conversation around architecture. I know you talk about this a lot in your work, the architectural moves that you put into pieces. Explain where that tension lives and how the small things end up influencing the larger decisions you make.
Wow. Sometimes a small gesture becomes a large gesture in a piece of clothing. You know, over the last 10 years, I've had an incredible experience, I think, learning my craft and collecting a group of people in an atelier in New York from all generations that have the ability, the drive to almost take their life experience of working in fashion and in clothing in New York and bringing it into new garments. It's sort of keeping a history alive. I've created my studio as a school. We have tons of a large internship program, and it basically, we're teaching construction, experimental construction, craft. I mean, the end result is something that has a classicism to it in the work right now, which I'm really happy about. There's something almost more avant-garde about dressing up than dressing down. It's sort of the new punk. In a way, I think when you see the fashion leaders that are going for it and have strong looks or actually pop from the street, it's more of a statement in dressing up again as an outsider than dressing down.
So when we talk about design, certainly in the tech community, whether it's a piece of software design, hardware design, constraint is a word we use a lot. That we have only this screen to work within, these materials to build this phone, this space to design a building. What are the constraints that you look for, aside from the body, that really end up driving your creative process?
The constraints. Well, fabric. Fabric is your medium. So I think you never want to fight a fabric. You always want to work with the fabric. You want it to help you achieve what you're trying to, the goal that you're trying to achieve. You want to make, and then, so that's sort of the confinements there. And then in terms of building a collection, you know, a message. This season we were working with separates. You know, we had taken separates out of the collection for a while to build a very focused evening direction, and then I wanted to now break it up and start adding that in. So that was, you know, that's what we put into place to, you know, sort of goals, and also a limited fabric palette. I cut down my fabric palette in half and then just expanded it through colorway.
What changes have you seen in fabric, particularly driven by technology? What allowances have you seen, just progress in the last decade?
Well, so many. I mean, obviously the continuous expansion of man-made synthetic fabrications are huge. And then I've also seen a huge sway into natural fibers again, into sustainable fibers. There's definitely way more of a consciousness in our industry. I hope there's more of that as we go forward. I worked with Invista at DuPont for years, going to Wilmington, Delaware, and working on wearable whites, where I remember sitting, with the Teflon, invisible Teflon layered on a white suit that you could just throw wine on and it would dribble off. I mean, you want to use technology in subtle ways. To me, seeing the reaction to craft and handcraft, it pushes me to work even more into that than being directly inspired by the aesthetic of this new universe that we're living with, which is a virtual universe on its own. I sound very Al Gore right now, a virtual universe on its own. But that's what's happening. There's a whole other world that people are living and communicating on, and it has a different set of rules and different value system, and it sort of is reestablishing what people like and are drawn to.
So you talk about the spilling of wine on a piece of fabric. There has to be sort of a user experience consideration that you must have, and that's certainly something that's big in technology. This understanding of how a user works through a particular flow. How many buttons do they click? What is the experience on this website? Is that something that you consider when you're constructing a garment?
Of course.
How the person feels?
This is a functional piece of clothing, whether it's an enormous gown or a pair of pants. It has to be wearable, enjoyable, and delicious, and timeless for me. I think with all of the technology that's being developed, I think that the kind of work that I'm making now in a funny way is a reaction to that. And it's interesting that it's also communicating through it as well. But right now, I'm not at the time where I'm doing like a collection that's inspired by the prints of my Twitter feed. Or my Instagram feed. It's not. I'm not taking that direct.
We won't see that embroidered into the next.
I don't think so. Not yet. I mean, I think there's beauty in information and visual information digitally, for sure. There's great artists that are doing that and great designers. But I think that you have to balance it with almost re-explaining the history and craft of making clothing through it, through Instagram, through media. Through
whatever media you have. So you started at a very young age, started a company at a very young age.
Crazy.
A lot of parallels with Silicon Alley, Silicon Valley, the startup community
I missed
in
the
tech.
.com,
the .com, exactly.
Investment.
What advice would you have for a young person engaged in a startup today?
Wow. I think my advice to a young person in a startup, if I put my business hat on, is to keep it very small. I think it's really important.
We were just talking about hands-on backstage.
To build your integrity, hands-on, exactly. I mean, I'm involved in, my hand goes through almost every single piece, if not every piece, whether it's in my Zac Posen collection, which the images will be coming onto style.com very soon, exclusively.
Like
it was announced in women's wear. And then our Z-Spoke collection as well. I mean, my hand goes through all of that. I think that advice is to actually be physically making your own clothing. There's so much product out there in the world. It really needs to be special. It really needs to have the utmost integrity. And I think in a culture that wants speed and immediacy, you almost have to, put your brakes on a little bit and rein it in. I mean, I have it from my own experience. I never really expected sort of the amount of energy that was brought towards me at such a young age. I mean, I lived it, so I'm still here, and I survived it. But it's definitely, fashion is a very excitable industry. And business, and I believe that as a young creator, you have about 2 years of what I call fashion equity, and that's the time when you can, sell to the department stores and survive, but then you have to become a business for them. Otherwise, you become something ephemeral, and you become something that exists but isn't really existing as a part of the machine. And that's, if you stay with that integrity, you find what part on the assembly line of the fashion machine you are, who your part is in the MGM star system. Are you the ingenue? Are you, what the role is there? And I think once you figure that out, then you have to stay very true to your vision, not change around, not listen to too many people. I mean, I see a whole generation of younger designers right now, and I see the kind of work that they're presenting and how it quickly evolved from where they started out, that they had an identity. And I can really relate to my own creative growth looking at them. It's really reflective and seeing, and I can hear the things that are being told to them by the industry. And I think, at first I think I found it very sad. And then I thought, well, maybe this is a form of a rite of passage, and it helps, at the end of the day, come back to a really strong personal vision. But it might be a little bit of a journey to watch people, but that's creativity.
Very smart.
And that's what's something that's fun for people to watch. I mean, I hate to say that it's fun to watch people go through highs and lows and struggles, but it's part of human nature.
And that tension is fundamental to creation itself.
We live in a very voyeuristic culture, and if you can help curate that voyeurism, I think it's just the biggest opportunity in the world. I mean, and a real successful brand is totally sensual. So it's taste, it's smell, and you can convey, all the emotions through online communication. I mean, I cook, I put it on Instagram, and so now I have this whole food following that's separate than my model following, separate than my craft following, and you start to build these different communities and sort of see how they're going to grow for the future.
It's amazing. Thank you
Yeah,
so much,
thank
Zac.
you so much.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's great.
Bye.
Thanks.